Watch Jefferson climbs the ladder. Oh my goodness! Come on!
What is up, Jabroni? JJ back here with Stevers, talking a little MLB this lovely Saturday, August the 19th. Stevers, last week before we go into this week, which fun little 10 gamer starting up at 7 o'clock. Last week, honestly, felt like another good week for us overall. Obviously, for the folks that tailed and followed, Scholten's kind of pushed. It was kind of annoying that he could have had like a monster day for his price if they just took him out when they should have. I don't know how much more red flags they needed in him. I think it was like the 6th inning he was pitching into.
Yep.
And his pitch count was like up over 90. He started with a walk and then a single. And you're thinking it's like, okay, well, just take this dude out of the game. Like he's done enough. He was near min price. He's got us like a 20+ burger here. And then they allow the wheels to fall off a bit, or I think he ended up giving up 3 earned. Again, still ends up being a guy that got value. But
absolutely, dude, you hit that right on the head, man. He pitched great that day. You hit that right on the head. I think I direct messaged you right after that game to tell you, man, what a great call, because I wasn't on it. You were all over it.
Yeah, he could have nuked that slate at his price if they just pulled him. I'm watching the game and I'm literally like, what are we doing? Like, I just don't understand. Younger guy, he's clearly struggling now. He's deep into his pitch count. Why are we trying to make this work? But either way, yes, he's still, I don't know if he ended up on the quote unquote optimal per se, but it would have been tough to imagine he wouldn't have, because I still believe he ended up getting 16 or 17 at that 5K range, or 18 at that 5K range. But, before that inning, if they don't even bring him out that inning, he's en route for a 23, 24-point game with his Ks, with no runs, with the win in his favor. But he lost it all that inning, and it just didn't make any sense for what he was still doing out there. But overall, relatively good play last week. I think we touched on some strong points. Now, this would be the first, because I think we'd be doing this. This would be the third Saturday, Stevers, we're doing this. This is our first Coors slate, I think, together. And we understand that the fun old bag of tricks Coors brings into the mix. Yesterday, we were talking pre-show a bit. Yesterday, obviously, Colorado just completely tore the slate apart. I assume the optimal had 4 or 5 guys from the Rockies, right? You just overstacked the game and they scored 14 runs.
I actually didn't have a lot of Coors yesterday.
No, not saying you in particular. I'm saying people in general. If you just overstacked that game, that was your recipe.
Oh yeah, everything that shipped had a 5-man Rocky stack in it, I believe. I think the ones that really went nuke, that went high powered, had Phillies with it, had like Kyle Schwarber with it, and Rojas was real cheap, and Cave was real cheap. Like those are the ones that really nuked. Shout out to our guy Nuggets and Gary. Man, I was in that $25 single entry contest, man, and they took first and second. They chipped the whole thing, man. It was awesome.
Love it. Good for Nuggets, and always love Gary. So nice to see those two up there. So no, much respect there. Quick shout to the chat. Obviously, Jacob, my guy, what's up? Charles, Derek, Gary as well. So yeah, don't worry, Charles. We will be talking some baseball. This won't be like a Holden ran show. LOL. Speaking of Holden. Because he's not here, the show actually started on time. So kudos to us, Stevers. Always look forward to that. I know Stevers is more of on the diplomatic side. Doesn't like.
I like Holden. I don't know why you guys. I think you guys just bust his balls just to do it because it's fun, man. I think Holden's good, man. I like Holden.
Yeah, that makes one of us. I think so. I think Holden. I'm just kidding. Holden's obviously. I've been working with him long before Run Pure. So Holden's a super cool dude. And obviously has a great sense of humor. So, and Nimfufu brings up a great point. So far, this has been Holden's best show. It's actually typically what we get, right? Because obviously tomorrow the show is going to go off the rails immediately. It's just kind of par for the course. But all you can do is just put one foot in front of the other. Yes,
you keep him in line, JJ. You keep him in line.
KMB Squid, completely right. Nuggets is the man. But let's be clear. Let's give our boy Gary some credit too. He was up on the leaderboard yesterday. So much love for Gary. And Gary, I'll obviously talk to you tomorrow on our show. So looking forward to breaking down the games with you there.
Gary had it, JJ. Gary was in the lead in that contest, and I think it was a Seth Lugo strikeout right before he got pulled there, where Nuggets went ahead of him.
That's what makes it a shame, because ultimately you're always sweating as there's the late game hammers, right? And it's almost like it's almost like even like college football, like which starts in a bit, which I'm excited for. I think in the DFS streets, I think like I don't even look all day. Like I just don't. Like I kind of know my ownership numbers as far as my players go. And I kind of, and when the slates unlock, I look at where ownership is. So I kind of know where I have my leverage. And then I just let the games play out. And I kind of know how the games played out, whether I'm going to be potentially live for something or not, because I don't even want to sweat it. That's a terrible sweat. And Gary, I'm sure you could relate. Like it's a terrible sweat. You're sitting there in first most of the night and, you get snipped by somebody. And great that it was Nuggets. It could have been anybody, right? But great that it was Nuggets. And I think that, that added level of stress and sweat in that regard. Some people love it. I'm definitely not one of those. I just prefer to look after the fact, and I kind of know my numbers as far as ownership leverage. And I'll kind of know without looking. I'm probably about broke even this slate, or I probably lost a good chunk of change, or maybe I'm live. So, but the sweating back and forth, I'll look at the end of it when it's over. And God bless the folks that do it, that have the heart to do it. But to each his or her own, right? Jacob, thank you. I appreciate it. I want to be clear. Obviously, we nag on Holden. Holden's a great host, but he's got a great sense of humor, and it's just easy for a back and forth there. But yeah, that's unfortunate, Gareth. It's a shame you were first. Obviously, it's great that Nuggets was able to take it down as a run pure guy. But Gareth, hopefully bring it back again. Run it back. All right, so let's move into the slate now. I obviously tweeted about how the fact that this slate in particular is going to be very concentrated. And we're going to talk through every game, of course, and pitching matchups and stacks, but it's going to feel very concentrated. And what I mean by that is a lot of people are going to play this 8K range of pitchers. And a lot of people are going to stack cores, right? So it all fits. I've built line. It all fits. Like, it's not like you can't make it work. So a little different than what we've been doing. Like, if you remember, Stevers, the last 2 weeks, I've been trying to find that low price guy to tag with a higher priced guy, because, in some breaths we were overpaying for some pitchers. Like, that's not the case at all this slate. Like, the last 2 Saturdays have been filled with you just realizing no matter who you go with your 2 pitcher slots, you're overpaying. So because of that, I was really looking to find that bottom of the wheelbarrow guy that to punt pitching with a guy that I know I'm overpaying for, and build lineups that way. Today's going to be very different, right? Today, you can fit a lot of different things in. There's guys underpriced in the pitching area. There is a few guys briefly overpriced or slightly overpriced, but we'll talk on all that. But yes, looks good. And by the way, Slim Lancaster, welcome to the fucking Thunderdome, my friend. First time here, ready for baseball. Appreciate you for hanging out. And hopefully you stay a little longer than a few minutes. Lube up and enjoy the festivities. All right, so Gary on Irvin. So that's we'll get there, Gary. We're already coming out with the hot takes. Fair enough. Colorado hits a week's worth of hits and home runs. Yeah, so we'll talk on all that, Derek. And so, Steve, without further ado, I guess let's just dive right into this 10-piecer. So the first game up, Detroit-Cleveland. This is actually a good game to start with, because very chalky pitcher in this game. Likely going to be the highest owned pitcher on the slate. It would actually, I'm not saying he will be. It would just be surprising if he wasn't, because he should be. There's going to be other pitchers that are higher owned in their respects, but BB is your typical cash guy today. And I know we don't use that word often anymore, right? It's like an expired word in DFS. But for your 50-50 lineups, your double ups, your heads ups, your quote unquote cash game type stuff, BB's like your mortal lock on the slate. Now, granted, of course, that can go south in its own way, but you just look at this guy's peripherals, right? Detroit's projected 3.5 runs at VIG'd on the under. He's only 8,200. His Ks are 6.5 at -120, which I do believe is the highest on the slate. Now I haven't seen Urias's numbers, because in theory that could get there, but for now we'll say 6.5 -120 is the highest on the slate. And then on the outs recorded, and then I'm just talking DK peripherals here, 17.5 at -165. That is a big number. That basically shores up he's going to have a quality start-esque. And you're not paying $9,500 for this dude. You're paying $8,200. I don't even understand his price. It's actually annoying, because if they price him right, it makes this slate a lot more fun. Because he's priced here, he's going to be played a ton. I just don't understand. He's 9,500 against Toronto, 8,500 at Tampa, goes over 20 in both games, and they reduce his price when he's at home against Detroit. Sometimes this DK algorithm is kind of funny. But needless to say, I want to be clear. I bet this game over. So I know I bet it over at 8 minus 102. I know you can look at it and see 7.5 minus 120. I look at that as you're paying 18 cents for a half run. I don't see the merit there. With that said, when I do it, I do it when I get to a winning number. Like I wouldn't buy up or buy down, however you want to refer to it as, to be on a push number. Like I would consider going from 8 to 7.5, just not for 18 cents. So I still prefer the 8 minus 102 that I got. And the reason I like the over, before I get to you, Stevers, the reason I like the over is just a number play. Like Manning, first of all, the regression has already begun. I think he had a decent start his last time out, I think, but the regression's already begun. And if you look at his advanced stuff, this dude is getting hit hard. And that's likely to be the case tonight as well. Look, will the hard hits find gloves? Of course, possibly. But we get a nice little warm game in Cleveland tonight. It's not super warm, but certainly not cold weather by any means, and whether that would impact, the ball not being able to carry. BB's been great, but BB has not been this 2.9 ERA guy. He's definitely gotten himself out of a lot of jams with his high K upside. But for me, this is just a pure number play. Yesterday, the Guardians went through their pen. Granted, in small capacity with these guys not going a whole lot of pitches, but I know Clase closed the game. I know they had their setup guy in between. So you're going to see these guys potentially again if this is a close game late. But these guys are going back to backs, and the Tigers pen I don't have much respect for anyway. And Manning doesn't really eat a lot of innings. I mean, BB can in theory, but Manning usually doesn't eat a lot of innings either. So this game is going to likely fall into the pens at the bottom third of the game. So needless to say, it's a pure number play. This number not even just feels, this number should be about 8.5. At 8, I was happy to jump on at minus 102. And again, I do prefer 8 over the 7.5, so you don't pay as much vig. But with that said, this game, BB, what says you, Stevers? Because a lot of people are going to be picking him in their lineups.
Yeah, and rightfully so. He might end up being the highest owned pitcher on the slate. I have him just behind. So, now Saber is showing him the highest owned pitcher. He's up there with Framber and Yu Darvish, who we'll talk about. This 8K range is going to be popular for sure. I love Tanner Bybee today. He's going to be on. I'm going to be very overweight on him. The 8,200 price tag, like you said, that's just, I don't know. I don't know what the DK algorithm is either, but 8,200 just seems too cheap for the spot he's in. I'm with you on the over. You must have got that 8 at minus 102 kind of early, because now I only see 7.5 at minus 120. It's all I see anywhere now. So you must have got that kind of early today. No.
Yeah. And you can, look, they let you bet alternates. So in theory, like if I click this game, I'm wondering, I just want to peek quick what that total is. Alternate total runs, it's funny. So like right now you can bet over 8 minus 105 in this game if you want. So you'd pay 3 more cents than I got. But yes, I did get it this morning, but keep in mind any book for that matter, and anybody watching as well, you give out a number, the MLB markets are a lot different now than they were 5-6 years ago, because of course it's legalized, and you can bet, basically make up your own bet if you want, as far as spreads and totals on games. And obviously with the NFL coming, that'll be granular for sure in that regard. So if you want, you'll pay 3 more cents than I did, but it's not going to kill you for sure. Anything you want to add there, Stevers? Obviously people are going to look to BB, probably not as much the bats, but I'll be honest, because I like the over, I'm very content to play. And I'm saying BB just because I'm a Bieber guy. So to me, he's always going to be BB. By the way, me and Justin Bieber share the same birthday, or I could argue he stole my birthday. We both have the same birthday, but he kind of wanted to have my birthday. It was weird, very strange in that regard. But needless to say, I do like the Cleveland bats here, just because I do think they get to Manning. It wouldn't surprise you if the Tigers squeeze a few off of BB either. But I do like the Cleveland's bats here. You do anything with Cleveland's bats?
It's a cheaper place to go, right? So for anybody that's playing a lot of Coors Field, if you're going to 5-man at Coors and you got to get cheaper somewhere, let's say you're going down the path I'm going, where I am going to play 2 pitchers here in this 8K range, most likely. If you're playing Coors, and there's not super expensive bats at Coors, but if you do need to get cheap somewhere, Cleveland's a nice place to do it. I'm on board with you over the 7.5 or the 8, whatever you're taking there. And it's more of a narrative reason for me. Again, I'm not a bets guy. I try to stay in my DFS lane over here. I'll let you guys, you bets experts, analyze that. But for some reason, Tanner Bybee is getting run support. And he's one of the only guys in the Cleveland rotation that is getting run support. In his last 10 starts, he's 7-0. Which, I think he's got good win equity here. Again, it's going to be a popular play, but for all the right reasons. I mean, he's got the strikeout upside. If you believe in the narrative, he's got the narrative where he's getting run support for some reason. So yeah, I'm interested in some of the Cleveland sticks. You can get quite a few of them at these very cheap price tags too. I mean, outside of J-Ram, they're all, the majority of these guys, you get these Oscar Gonzalez's and Bo Naylors. I think they're, against Manning, I think they're going to roll out 6 or 7 left-handers today. So yeah, I have some interest in Cleveland bats. It's, not somewhere I'm going to 5-stack on a slate that has Coors on it, obviously, but it's all about Tanner Bybee today. I'll be full of it. He'll be all over my lineups, and as he should be in yours too. He comes highly recommended, and it will reflect in his ownership.
Yeah, and I think that for me, like, Beebe's obviously going to be popular. I think what could make it a little different is pairing Beebe with J-Ram and even Cole Calhoun. I mean, Cole Calhoun just feels like a complete free square. I know that.
Yes. I forgot all about Cole Calhoun. Yes, it does feel like a free square, doesn't it? He's hitting in the 3-hole today. I do like that option. I don't remember his price tag. Isn't it like 3,600 or something?
He's 26, even cheaper.
26.
So, yeah. So he just feels like a free square. Obviously, if you're looking for options there, to me, and you want to play J-Ram, but you don't want to play him alone, I would rather play Calhoun with him over Quan, just for the price savings, because you're going to want some money on this slate. Granted, you're not going to be tight with money, but you are going to want some bats that are going to be somewhat costly, especially in the Coors game. So I guess without further ado, we could probably move on to the next game here, Stevers. Next up, we have Minnesota and Pittsburgh. So we got Minnesota with an implied total 4.5 minus 120, and the Pirates 3.5 minus 115. Sonny Gray on the hill for the Twins, Mitch Keller on the hill for the Pirates, both similarly priced in that mid to high 8K range. K props are somewhat similar. Sonny Gray 5.5 minus 130, Mitch Keller 6.5 plus 135, and then outs recorded very similar as well, with Sonny Gray getting an edge there. What do we like here, if anything, Stevers? Because these pitchers are going to see some ownership, but definitely not a lot. And I can't imagine people are going to really go to the bats here at all on this slate. Is there anything here you like?
So Sonny Gray is going to have some ownership. I fully believe that. He's going to be up near 20% ownership, if not higher. And again, I think he should be. You know how I always like to talk about, JJ, I always talk about on these shows, at least the last couple of shows, I talk about the boring baseball game, the unwatchable baseball game of the day. I think this is it. Again, I don't know much about bets, but this is an 8.5 total. This game could be really boring. I'm not going to have any bats in this game. If I were going to, it would definitely be on the Minnesota side. You can still get some good prices there against Mitch Keller, but Mitch Keller's not somebody I like to pick on. And I do really like Sonny Gray today. So I personally, I won't have any bats in this game. I'll have a lot of Sonny Gray, though. I'm going to have, of the 3 or 4 pitchers that are in that 8K range, Sonny Gray is definitely one of my favorites. I think he performs really well. Pittsburgh is somebody I like to target all the time anyway. They're just a subpar offense in this league. So no bats. Definitely will have some Sonny Gray. Probably won't have much Mitch Keller though. So
yeah, definitely a decent. I can't even say pivot because you're right. The dude's going to see over 20% ownership today, very likely. But if you wanted to get off the uber chalky Bybee XYZ, you can go Sonny Gray. And by the way, Mitch Keller has been getting hit up basically since June. You can find some good starts in there from Keller, but he's been getting ripped apart since June. So obviously tread lightly there if you're going to play him, because he's going to see some ownership. He's going to probably see 13, 14% ish. So it's not like he's going to go unowned. But either way, we could probably move on to the next game. Let me just give a quick shout out to some of the folks in the chat. Yes, definitely Lancaster. These will be your chalky options tonight from that AK range. Undoubted. We'll get to Darvish later, but undoubted. You get Darvish at home. AK, good matchup. It's going to be a similar spot to Tanner. Lancaster, PA, are you Amish? First of all, no issues with the Amish. Very resourceful people. So I don't, even if that's the case, we are pro Amish on this show.
They're not watching the show, JJ.
Most likely not watching the show. Again, it goes back to very resourceful. Yeezy, my guy, what's happening? What's up, Joey? The Boston with Boyan. Nice. Boyan, who's richer than him? I don't know. Maybe Joey Work. Two of you. Hope you guys have a good time out there. What's up,
I feel like Boyan travels all the time. Is that true?
Yeah, he's basically a jet setter. So he's living that kind of lifestyle.
He's all over the place. I feel like.
Yeah. He's in multiple time zones a week. And credit to him. Jet setter lifestyle. I don't know if he has an IG, but he should, because he's living that lifestyle.
I'm jealous.
What fam going on about, Matt? I'm not sure what you were referencing over the last maybe 5 to 10 minutes of conversation. Maybe the Justin Bieber conversations about birthdays, maybe. But either way, all in good fun. Not even the lefties against Keller. That's what I was saying, Smack. Like, I know that maybe you said this before. I mentioned the Keller stuff, but Keller has been so bad since June. And you can definitely target him with some lefties if you'd like. Not going to hurt you. Or, I mean, it should be somewhat gratuitous for you. So Houston, Seattle
today, JJ. Just for the record, I'm not going to. I think Mitch Keller pitches pretty well today.
He very well might. Look, it wouldn't surprise me if he pitches well. I want to be very clear. It's just that consistently, he certainly has not been pitching well since June. And we the people, you're right. It could very well be a pitcher's duel. And if it is, look, you're going to get better leverage on a guy like Keller than you will like Gray. So,
don't watch this game, folks. Go do something else. This game will probably be very boring.
All right, we'll move over to Houston, Seattle. Framber Valdez, Logan Gilbert, two guys who have pitched pretty well this year overall. Total 7.5, relatively low for this park. Houston minus 140. It's given a decent respect to Gilbert, to be honest, Stevers. Overall, just to quickly touch on the peripherals, both teams projected 3.5, sub 3.5 runs. Houston obviously has heavy vig on that 3.5, with them being a decent home favorite. Valdez 10,200, Gilbert 8,800. K props similar, with the edge going to Valdez, and then the out props very similar, believe it or not, as well between these two. Again, a lot of respect to Gilbert in this start. What are you doing here, if anything? Obviously, this game figures to be lower scoring, and maybe it's hard to really love bats in this game. It's hard at the pricing. I know Valdez is going to see ownership, but man, like, as far as upside goes, I'd argue some of these AK guys have just as much upside. Which to me is going to lower his ownership. I know that he's projected to be at about 22, 23%, maybe a little less, Valdez. I just see people really trying to figure out how to make things work with this AK range. Valdez might be that guy that gets left off. And let's be honest, he has upside, but he has similar upside to these AK guys. Are you looking to be a little different, because you really won't be totally different, but are you looking to really pay up for Valdez on this slate, Stevers?
I am not, no. So I'm looking at Saber. I see Framber at about 25% ownership. You have Darvish just under that. Darvish is 2,200 cheaper. And I would argue that Darvish has more upside on this slate than Framber has. So no, Framber is, he'll be in the player pool for some of my 20 max and stuff like that, but I'm certainly not going to pay this price tag for him in my main lineups. There are some stacks I want, and exposure to Coors Field. Not that exposure to Coors Field is expensive, but I would just rather stay lower than Framber's price tag than pay up for him here. And it does look like he's going to be owned, so I don't mind getting under that type of ownership either. Maybe rightfully so should be owned. I mean, Seattle has been pretty bad against left-handed pitching. I was looking this up earlier. They've struck out 293 times against left-handers. That's good for 7th most in the league. Framber had two disappointing, kind of I don't want to say disappointing, but from a DFS standpoint, very underwhelming performances after that no-hitter in Cleveland. So I just won't have a lot of him today. Matter of fact, I might not have any Framber today because I just think there's a wealth of upside in this 8K range that I'm going to try to take advantage of. And it helps me get to the bigger mini stacks that are outside of Coors that I'm interested in. So no Framber, no Seattle bats, because Framber could, perform pretty well. Houston, maybe a little outpriced at Houston. I do think that Logan Gilbert is getting a little bit more respect than he deserves here. About 5 weeks ago, he went into Houston and he threw a nice game. He threw 7 innings. He had 0 walks. He had 6 Ks. It was good for 27 DK points. But, Logan Gilbert giving up an awful lot of hard contact. And we talked about it last week on the show that, Houston is, in my opinion, they are going to be one of the most dangerous teams moving forward for the rest of the season. And they have 2 big-time left-handed power bats in the middle of this lineup with Tucker and Yordan Alvarez. So I'm not interested in Gilbert. I may get a little bit of this left-handed power against him today. And I won't play Framber either because I like a lot of the stuff in the 8K range. So just not a lot here for me.
Yeah, I will say one thing. I do agree with you that Valdez is likely a fade. The one thing I'll say about the Mariners is after the All-Star break, they were struggling a ton. Their lineup actually looked like shit almost every day after the All-Star break. They may have found something. I think they've won 4 straight. And outside of yesterday where they only won 2-0, I think they had scored 6 runs or more in 3 straight games before that. Mm-hmm. The bats are finding a bit of life. So I'm not sure if we want to pay. Now, granted, what's ironic about this slate, Stevers, is the fact that the last 2 Saturdays, we've been in a situation where every pitcher was overpriced. So far, almost every pitcher we've discussed has been underpriced. Valdez at 10-2 is definitely under the marker where we're used to paying for him. Yeah. And the same thing with Gilbert. Gilbert's in this like 8-8 range where, he's been priced above 9 plenty of times this year. So just interesting how the last 2 weeks you got every pitcher overpriced. And today, there's a lot of pitchers that are underpriced. And we'll talk through more of them as well. But again, it gives you more options for your bats. But yeah, for me, Valdez is a fade just because of the whole slate as it is. I don't think he's a bad option. I just think he is running into he has been struggling his last 2 starts, and he's running into a Seattle team that might have finally found their bats. So that might be part of it as well. It might not just be the Gilbert respect with this line. It might be the fact that Seattle's kind of starting to find themselves with the sticks, and that might be part of this line as well. Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on to the next game. So St. Louis versus the New York Metropolitans. I did bet this game as well. I did bet the Mets. The reason being is I do believe they should be up near the minus 125 area in this start. Now, granted, Miles Mikolas is okay. Senga to me is better. It's been better. And also the Cardinals are once again streaking. This team, you want to talk about a team that just can't get understood. Like I do not understand what is going on with this team throughout this season. They just go from looking like they won before this Mets series and the last game of the A's. They had won, 5 of 6. It's like, okay, maybe they're turning the corner again. They get shut out by Oakland, and they've scored 3 total runs in this 2-game series so far against the Mets. They're just doing this thing that they've been doing this year where they're not hitting. And we know the sport's streaky as it is. And to me, the Mets obviously aren't playoff bound by any means, but they're not actively trying to lose games. Their bats have come alive a bit as well, including Alonso. And I think that for me, it's just a cheap price. It's a cheap price, all things considered. And the Cardinals have been good to me this year. Granted, their record, when I've bet their games, it's been a great ROI for me this year. And again, I think that I'm jumping at the right time here at this price. It is a relatively short price, all things considered. So I fired on the Mets. I got that minus 108 earlier today. You could probably get minus 112, minus 115, something like that. Not the end of the world, but once you get into that like 118, 120 area, just realize value's sapped. I'm no longer a fan there. So yes, I do like the Mets in this spot. And I'll be honest, I'm not as big a fan of Senga. It's really more of that. It just makes sense that they get to Mikolas. Now Mikolas is interesting, right? He's priced at 6,600. He never gets strikeouts, but his price is cheap. The reason I wouldn't play him is just because I don't like the spot for him at all. And I don't think he's going to get any run support anyway. So But I guess in theory, I could be convinced it's a Senga. So walk me through what your thoughts are on this game, Stevers.
Yeah, so I'll have some Senga in the player pool. His last start, he pitched on Sunday night, and I do the playbook on Sunday nights for the showdown. And he came out in the first inning. He gave up 3 runs. He just didn't look like he was trusting his stuff. He was, and that happens when pitchers face the Braves, right? Like they all know, they're all aware of how potent the Braves lineup can be. And he went out there and he just didn't look comfortable at all. And then once he got through the first inning, he cruised. He ended up with like 22 DK points after giving up, I think it was 2 walks. He gave up 3 hits, 3 earned runs in the first inning. And then he settled in and he started to trust his stuff. And when he does that, he's got swing and miss. He can work inside the strike zone and get swing and miss. And I like guys like that. I'll definitely have some Senga in the pool today. This is kind of a strange game for me because both of these teams, I only like the top of the lineups. But if you're going to get the top of the lineup in, like let's say today that you don't like Senga and that you like Cardinals bats, if you're going to get the top of the lineup for St. Louis, you're going to have to pay for it. I mean, there are still serious price tags here. Goldschmidt at 58, Arenado at 56. I do like, so you can still get Tyler O'Neill at 3,800. I know it's a righty-righty matchup, but I actually like that play a lot, even as a one-off. I won't have many bats in this game. I do like Senga. He'll be in the player pool. And for the Mets, it's all about 1 through 4 for the Mets for me. Nimmo, Lindor, McNeil, and Alonso. Once you go down, I mean, Vogelbach has some power, but once you go down and you get into this DJ Stewart and Danny Mendick area, there's just not going to be, in my opinion, there's just not going to be a lot of offensive production there. So I won't have bats in here. But again, it's kind of a slate where you're either concentrating on Coors Field or you're not. So I'll have a lot of Coors personally. So again, not a lot in this game. I'll have Senga in the pool. I won't have any Michaelis in the pool. I do actually kind of like the Mets a little bit today.
Yeah, I could definitely be convinced into mini stacking the Mets here, whether it's, whether you find yourself with Alonso, who, yes, sure, had a bad day yesterday, but had homered back-to-back games prior. Does feel like he's starting to find it a bit. And I know that it's like, oh, well, he's hitting 221. Yeah, well, like 3 weeks ago, he was barely hitting 200. So his average has jumped quite a bit over the last, call it 2 to 3 weeks. And you always know you got the pop out of him. And look, let's be honest. It's not like he's going to see much ownership today. I mean, you're talking 6 to 7% ownership. Yeah. And Michaelis, obviously more of a ground ball pitcher, but is almost just as bad against righties as he is lefties. So consider me a fan of Alonso today. I don't mind it at all. Definitely my home run shot call for the day. I just think it makes a lot of sense. And whether you want to pair him with a guy like McNeil, who has limited upside, or maybe you want to go a 2-4 with Lindor, or maybe stick, him with Vogelbach, which both obviously have pop upside. So I don't mind that at all either. But actually, can you do it? You can't do it with Vogelbach because they both play first at DK. Obviously, you'd be able to make it work on FanDuel, but you won't be able to make that work on DK. So scratch that thought. But I wouldn't want to one-off Alonso, so I would want you to pair him with somebody if you're playing him. And maybe it's Alvarez or going 4-6. But in reality, I do like Alonso. Definitely my home run shot call. And I know it's not a crazy take, but let's be honest. It's a take on a night where he's going to be 6% owned. So I do consider
there's no substitute for a guy that can put up 14 DK points with one swing at a bat. And Pete Alonso's a perfect example of that. I don't care if he's hitting 220. The guy can put the ball over the fence on any pitch. So
completely agree. Quick shout, Brittany, always love you. Appreciate you giving us a shout and hitting the like button, folks. It's not hard. I know that a lot of you have multiple tabs open, probably fucking incognito windows with porn or with money laundering or something else going on. But the least you can do is take one of your fingers that you have and just like the video. It's really not that hard. And of course, you can comment as well. As you can see, we always get to the comments. So don't be shy. Nobody likes a silent stalker. No one's going to call you out unless, you're one of Holden's burners sliding into the chat because those are easy to find. But other than that, it's a safe place. It's like Planet Fitness here. Drop a comment below. We'll obviously get to it. And like the video, it's really, really not hard. All right, move on to the next game, Stevers. So Atlanta, San Francisco. Now, this is actually an interesting one, or I'll call it intriguing. Logan Webb. It's always intriguing when you get Atlanta bats against a good arm. Now, I do prefer it when you get Atlanta bats against a good arm on the road, where Atlanta's on the road. Now, Atlanta being home does change things a bit, and it is very warm today, which of course impacts things as well. But it's not very often, and I say this because I'm interested in your perspective here, Stevers. It's not very often you're going to get an Atlanta team at home that's not going to be really owned. Obviously Acuna always sees ownership, so expect him to see his, typical 10 to 12, 13% ownership at least. But the rest of these guys are literally expected to be unowned today. So it's Logan Webb, great pitcher. Obviously, people aren't going to go to Atlanta today because of it. What are you doing with this situation? And just to be clear, before you go, the Chirinos for Atlanta has been an absolute fucking can this year. So on that note, do you like any San Francisco bats? Can you even be convinced into Atlanta bats at basically peak prices against a really good arm?
So the answer for me is no. Atlanta is always an option, though. I can't argue with anybody that is going to stack Atlanta today. I get it. Logan Webb is a good arm. There's no doubt about it. But this Atlanta team 1 through 9 is just different. They're on pace to break the home run record, first of all, the single season home run record. They have upside on every slate. There are guys in this lineup that can do serious damage against any pitcher in the league. Today, you're going to get them at lower ownership for, a couple of reasons, right? One, because a lot of people are going to play Coors. 2, because they are facing a good pitcher in Logan Webb. But I can't put up an argument with playing a 5 stack of Braves if you can afford it. I think that's a reasonable option on any slate. With that said, I actually really like San Francisco today. So the Giants have been terrible, right? Post All-Star break, they are at the bottom of the league in almost everything. In average and OPS, they have just been an absolute train wreck. But Yannick Chirinos is kind of a pitch-to-contact guy. He's not going to strike anybody out. I mean, he might get a couple, but I actually, and you can get a lot of really good Giants price tags today, like every other day. I mean, everybody in this lineup is very affordable. We don't have that lineup yet. We have the Atlanta lineup. We don't have the Giants lineup yet, but I actually like the Giants a lot today.
It is just so you know, Steve, it did recently come out. So
it did come out?
It's Wade, Meckler, Flores, Peterson, Conforto, Davis, Sable, Camargo, and Estrada. If you could either refresh DK or refresh. It's out.
There it is. Yeah. So it's not their best lineup, right? Oh yeah, and they got a couple of young guys in here too. They got Meckler in there. They got Camargo in there. Still, I'm gonna go here for mini stacks and for one-offs. I don't believe in Yannick Chirinos. I kind of believe in the narrative that the Giants feel if they don't score runs, they're going to get blown out, right? Like the Atlanta Braves will embarrass you if you're not careful. That nobody wants to get beat 10-0. Nobody wants to come out here and get their brains beat in, regardless if you're in a playoff hunt or not. So yeah, San Francisco bats are a place that I'm going to go for some minis and I'm going to go for some one-offs for sure. They're very reasonable price tags, and with Chirinos being not this is just a middle of the road type of guy, just a guy that can get hit hard. So yeah, I'm definitely all about San Francisco today.
Yeah, and I'll just get to a few comments before I make a little more give a little more perspective. We talked on some cards, few outs. Brother Numse, weird. Like, I don't even know. Look, I'll be honest. I'm not sure how much you follow my content or in general, but It's going to be a lot of weird shit that gets said on this show and these shows. So buckle the fuck up, brother. Not sure if it was something I said or just weird in relation to Atlanta not being owned, but strap that seatbelt in, my friend. All right. So Andrew Martinez back to the Guardians. So here's my issue real quick with that, Andrew, just to be clear. If you do that, I think it limits upside a bit just because I think Oscar Gonzalez is in that 4-hole. And I know he's like a punt play, but I really don't like to punt two guys in a lineup that don't have as much upside. Like Cole Calhoun and him being punted together likely means I need multiple hit games out of each of them because they just don't have power. So consider on my end, if you're going to play anybody on Cleveland, it's got to be J-Ram with one of those two if you want to pair it. I necessarily wouldn't go 2, 3, 4. Not that you can't. I just the only way that gets there is if you get multiple hits from 3 and 4. And it's just on a slate like this where there's going to be bats that are a little more easy to get to. It makes it tough. And speaking of bats that are easier to get to, on the San Francisco end, these guys are dirt cheap. And yes, the Giants haven't hit right. I know they've had one run in their last 2 games combined. And look, we've been on these shows weekly and saying how San Francisco's not hitting. I mean, granted, they come in spurts, but I mean, you can get 1 and 2 in this lineup for nothing. You can get Wade at 35. You can get Flores at 34 and Meckler meshed in between at 2,100. We'll talk on the 9-hitter for either the Rockies or the White Sox. I know the 9-hitter for one of those teams is going to be somewhat chalky, but I mean, Meckler, we talk about free squares. Like this dude feels like a free square. He was absolutely raking in the minors. And he's 2,100. The matchup's great. The ballpark's great. Lots to like there, guys. I don't know. I'm just trying to check what his ownership's coming in at. It looks like he's going to be about 10% owned, probably the highest owned guy on this Giants team today. But the rest of it's not going to be owned. I'm not saying you overstack this Giants team, but it is warm in Atlanta. The ball carries. Chirino sucks. It wouldn't surprise me if a few of these guys end up in the optimal tonight, especially since they're so cheap. So I think at minimum, try to get out of your biases, play a few of these Giants bats in some capacity, especially if you're playing multiple lineups. And Slim, you bring up a good point. Atlanta, the best contrarian stack. They're not going to be owned tonight. So you can either overstack the game, do whatever you want. Logan Webb is going to be a tough guy to hit for sure. But Logan Webb doesn't play every game against this Atlanta team in this Atlanta weather in that Atlanta ballpark. So he's fortunate enough to throw in San Francisco and fortunate enough to obviously not see this team every start. So yes, I think
hit anybody. Atlanta can hit anybody.
100%.
I don't see how anybody can put up an argument about stacking 5 Atlanta Braves on your team on any slate because they can literally hit anybody.
And that's a good point. And that's a good point, Stevers. And your point, Matt, as well. Like you can, if they're going to be 7-8% owned, even at the high end of things, even if you went 15% Atlanta today, you would be at minimum double the field. And to your point, it's never a bad spot, really, to be overweight on Atlanta, especially when they're not chalk, and they're far from chalk on this slate. All right, let's move on to the next game. So Coors Field, here we come. You get a warm weather game in Coors, total 11.5. I know it got steamed down. I know our boy Schulten's got us there last week. To me, completely unplayable in this start. I get it. He's been good. This is a lot to ask out of him on the road against Colorado when we know for a fact when you play Schulten's, he's going to be in jams. Okay. There's no doubt about it. Even in the start, he threw well last week. He was in jams and he got out of jams. It's a lot to ask of him in warm weather here in Colorado to pitch well. $5K, don't get me wrong, it's a fair price overall, but why go to him on this slate? Like to me, if you want to play Schulten's that bad, like truly, if you want to play Schulten's that bad, just don't play Colorado bats. Like there's your happy medium. You want to play Schulten's, convince yourself not to, and then just avoid Colorado bats because clearly you think Schulten's going to pitch well. Then don't play Colorado bats. Colorado bats are going to be super chalky today. So, I get it. You go for that double edge, that double banger. Some people call it the Texas hedge, but I don't see any reason to play Schulten's at all. I know the only reason I'm asking is he's not going to see ownership, but I know somebody asked up there in the chat at some point. To me, completely unplayable. Even if he pitches well, no regrets from my end. But again, if he pitches well, if you faded the Rockies bats, you would likely be just as good. Unless of course they did all damage against the pen, which in theory I guess is possible. But this game though, Pitching's off the table for some obvious reasons. Bats are going to be super popular. You can play your AK guys. You can play your AK guys with a bunch of bats in this game. There's just no doubt about it. Like, obviously, it's going to be where everybody goes. This game's going to see a sick amount of ownership. Like you might need Tums after the game. Like that amount of ownership is going to be in this game. And look, and some of it's for the right reasons, right? I mean, we're seeing three or four of these guys are going to be over 20% owned. Almost 8 to 10 bats from this game are going to be more than 15% owned. This is what happens, right? You get Coors off of a Coors night, and here's what you have, right? You get a 5.9 implied total for the White Sox, a 5.7 implied total for the Rockies. Stevers, what are we doing here? We going with the chalk? Do we find certain pivots in the chalk? Do you want to do mini stacks? What are we doing here with Coors Field?
I mean, it's hard not to play this game. I couldn't recommend to anybody having zero exposure to this game. I mean, it's Coors Field. It's obviously it's going to be the highest total on the board, no matter who's playing there. Obviously, it's going to be the Rockies. It's going to be one of them. But I mean, as terrible as the White Sox are, they're still in a prime spot. I mean, I wouldn't recommend anybody fading this game. Just have some exposure to it. If you want to be under, go ahead and go under. But like you said, there's going to be massive exposure to this game because it just fits well. Like your most popular builds today are going to be two of those pitchers in that 8K range, and then it's going to be Rockies and White Sox. No matter what side of the game you go on, I actually think the White Sox side is going to be more popular than the Rockies side. Just to touch on what you said about Jesse Scholtens, don't pitch Scholtens today. I understand he's a 5K price tag, but if you're going to, play Cole Irving instead at 5,500 against the A's in Oakland, like there's just no reason to pitch Scholtens today. There's no reason to pitch Kyle Freeland either. Like, pitching at this ballpark is just not an option in my opinion. But the bats are going to be heavily owned, and I'll have a ton of them as well because Coors can nuke the slate. They absolutely can. I mean, there are fly balls in this ballpark that will end up being home runs that wouldn't be home runs in any other ballpark. So you got to have pieces of it. You got to have exposure to it. My favorite part of this game, I really like the first three hitters in the Rockies lineup. I really like Blackmon, Tovar, McMahon. I just feel like they're going to get the ball rolling. These guys, I mean, they might get 6 at bats today, depending on the game flow and how it plays out. I mean, you can't argue with the conditions, the pitchers, and the opportunity, right? Opportunity is everything. And these guys I would guess these guys are going to see 5 at bats, and they might even see 6 at bats if they put up runs. So yeah, you got to have it. I just don't think it's wise to full fade this game at all.
And just to be clear, Scholtens has really egregious reverse splits, like very egregious reverse splits. So if you're going to target Scholtens, and I get it, the sample size isn't that large. It's a decent size. He's got 56 innings under his belt, but he is getting pummeled against right-handed bats. And he is unhittable. Unhittable against lefties, for that matter, are unhittable against him. So when you're going to play your bats, just realize that he has been very strong against the left side of the plate, and he has been getting mauled against right-handed bats. So you're going to target Colorado guys. Obviously a lot of them are lefties. Well, a handful of them, of course, are lefties, but it's not going to kill you to go with the righties. Even Tovar, obviously a righty. Brendan Rodgers, who's going to be a very popular play because he's really been slinging dick the last few days. 14 points or more in 3 of his last 4 games, 20 in back-to-back, seeing the ball really well. And again, you're going to want righties that are seeing the ball really well because that's what Scholtens really just can't get out. So just keep that in mind, building lineups. Not that lefties can't do it today, but just look at the numbers. Like, Scholtens has been really good against lefties. And on the Colorado side, the Colorado side, on the Chicago side, look, Luis Robert Jr. might be one of the higher owned guys on the slate because you can afford him. and because he has a tremendous amount of power, and of course he's getting a lefty, you actually couldn't draw up a better spot for Luis Robert Jr. today. So yes, he's going to be deservedly owned. And, likely, I don't want to say likely dongs, but he's in as good as a spot as he will be all season to dong. So, and he obviously has a tremendous amount of power. Elvis Andrus leading off with 3,400 is going to be uber popular. And I just want to make one mention to that kid, Lennon Sosa, who they brought up while Tim Anderson's out. This dude had a tremendous amount of power in AAA. I know that he hasn't shown anything at the major league level yet. I know he struggled severely. I think his average was like a 150. But again, if you're building a tournament lineup, the guy's 2K. He dongs in this park. You've already 7x'd his price. So something to keep in mind as well. All right. So I think we talked enough there. Stevers, we've made our points across on the Coors end. It's obviously going to be chalky, but you can find your pivots.
One more point real quick, JJ, if you
go
don't mind. I actually don't think it's a bad idea to get – so you have Blackmon and you have McMahon, who both hit left-handed at the top of this Colorado lineup. And I don't think it's a bad idea to have one or both of them. I don't. I understand that Schultz is very good against left-handers, but everybody that's going to play this game is going to want these right-handers. And if you want to be a little bit different, you're going to have to mix in a couple of these left-handers. And Charlie Blackmon and Ryan McMahon are just good sticks. They're good hitters against right-handers or left-handers. These guys are to be reckoned with. So I have no problem getting exposure to one or both of them.
100%. Again, I can't mind it. Obviously, they're good prices. They're in good spots of the lineup. And of course, Schulten's only going to pitch 5 innings max. And if I don't think he's going to do well anyway, it's not going to matter. So yeah, I think that he'll be out of the game regardless. So yeah, all I'll mention is the fact that obviously Schultz has been good. And Riley, welcome to the club, my friend. I don't know what you were doing that you felt was so much more important than this, but I'm glad that you're here. Obviously, an OG, Riley. All right, so and I'm seeing some fun Baltimore Oakland chatter around Irvin, which we'll get to as the next game. But before that, we'll discuss San Diego and Arizona, which should be a quicker game to discuss. Because look, to me, it's Darvish or bust. I don't love the hitting options on the San Diego side today at the price. Now, granted, you're going to get these guys in very favorable ownership, but overall, they're priced up. The ownership numbers, we're trying to pull the exact just so I don't put my foot in my mouth. Yeah, I mean, outside of Tatis, these guys are going to be 5% owned. And Tatis will barely be 10. So Darvish is obviously a great look. He's going to be chalky, somewhat chalky. He's great at home. Matchup's great. Arizona's been somewhat spiraling a bit. So what are we doing here, Stevers? Is it Darvish and that's it, or anything else you like in this game?
Yeah, just Darvish, really. He's going to pull ownership, too. He's going to be between 20 and 25% because he's just in a prime spot. This Arizona Diamondbacks has really taken a turn for the worse. This team has really kind of gone south post All-Star break. I watched quite a bit of them, actually. And the one thing that stands out to me is they're not having good at-bats. They're swinging early in counts. They're not drawing walks. They're just a mess right now. They're just in shambles. So I think Darvish has a ton of upside in this matchup. He's only an 8K price tag. He'll pull the ownership, but deservedly so. Got to find out if there's any weather in this game. I need to look at that before I'm going to do anything.
It should be weather should be okay. I'm no weatherman. Should be okay in San Diego. Should be.
Okay. Well, I do know that the wind is blowing in at that ballpark, so it is a good pitcher's ballpark. We have, I just don't think it gets much better a spot for Darvish today. I mean, he has the upside. He's against a team that's struggling. It's a good ballpark to pitch in. So, yeah, I'll have a ton of you Darvish today. I won't have many of these bats. I won't have any Arizona bats. I won't have much of San Diego either, simply because a lot of them are high price tags, and they just don't complement and fit well with the Coors pieces I want. So, yeah, not a lot here outside of Darvish.
Yeah, and if it helps from my perspective, and Stevens, I'm sure you have a different perspective in your own right. But for me, it's BB, it's Darvish, and to me, almost like I'm ignoring the rest of the 8K range.
I'm gonna have quite a bit of Sonny Gray as well.
Okay, yeah. So I know you like Sonny Gray, so I do remember that. So that's fair. That's fair. For me, obviously, as when you're building your lineups, you want to pick your spots. You obviously don't want to be scattered everywhere with pitchers. I'm not talking about you, Steve. I'm just for people in general. And I think that pick your 2 or 3 in that range. There's a lot of options between that 7 to 9K range today. So pick your 2 to 3, stick there, and then just go with it. And then again, as for this game in particular, yeah, Darvish makes a ton of sense. The bats maybe not so much. But we can just move on. Now we'll move on to I'll skip past the Tampa Bay LA game for a moment because I know that the Baltimore Oakland game has been getting some chatter in the chat, no pun intended. You got Waldichuk going for Oakland, Cole Irvin for Baltimore. Argument could be, I'll be honest, like, and people, yeah, you guys might not like that. Like, to me, I actually consider Waldichuk to be a better play than Cole Irvin today. And I know that, like, you might not like that. You look at peripherals, you look at just multiple things in general, like in terms of K upside, ability to implode. Like, at least with Waldichuk, like, he's at least a guy that I can typically get 4, 5, 6 innings out of. He's actually pitched pretty well 3 of his last 4 starts. He's 5,300, so he's not much. So I actually prefer Waldichuk over Irvin. I want to be very clear. I'm not building lineups around either of these dudes, but if you ask me to pick one of them, I would definitely be picking Waldichuk over Irvin. And I think that there's decent merit there. Waldichuk gets Ks. Like, as long as he can escape by the fifth inning, only giving up 2 earned or so, 3 earned, maybe max. Like, he might get the Ks to get you there. So, and he doesn't need much at his price. So we'll call it the option I like the most under 6K on the entire slate is Waldichuk. But with that said, you can also just target some bats in this game. This park, though, is extremely forgiving, as we've already seen for pitchers. So something to keep in mind while these pitchers are both in their own right semi-gas cans. I think you could argue to play either. I would prefer Waldichuk myself. Stevers, what says you about bats in this game, pitchers, anything you like?
So I'm actually the other way. You and I are on the opposite ends of this one. I would rather pitch Cole Irvin than I would Waldichuk in this one. Actually, I don't think there's any reason to go down here today, honestly. It's not like we have a Spencer Strider on the slate that's 12-7 or 12-8, and then you're trying to go down to find somebody. I think the only reason to go down here is if you want, like a 5-man at Coors, and then you want to try and get yourself like a really expensive mini stack. If you want to go to like San Diego or the Dodgers or the Braves, if you want to get like a 2-man or a 3-man of really expensive mini stack, maybe you go down here. But I'm not going to go down here. If I had to, it would be Cole Irvin. So Cole Irvin's actually been pretty good recently. Over the last 5 weeks, he's 26% K rate. He's not going to go long. He's probably only going to go between 60 and 70 pitches. But at 5,500, I could make a case for that. Again, it's not in my plans today because I just don't think I need to. But if this were a slate that had one of these super high price tags like Spencer Strider, I think Cole Irvin is definitely an option at 5,500 because you wouldn't need a lot from him, right? It's a very pitcher friendly ballpark. It's against a bad A's team, and you would really only need that 14, 15, 16 point performance for him to be optimal. But I don't have reason to go down there today, so I just won't have it.
Yeah, and I can't argue. As I even said, like, I could see people playing either. They're going to be low owned regardless. But it's always funny, right? Because if this was a slate where all these pitchers were overpriced, people would be looking to play more guys like the 2 pitchers in this game. I think that, and when I apologize for almost cutting you off, but Cole Irvin, yes, the pitch count would be your limitation, right? He's likely not going to throw more than 70 pitches today. So you're hoping he's going to be very efficient in his 5 innings, while he gets to 70 pitches. Whereas at least Waldichuk, can get to at least 100. Obviously, if he's holding his own, but contrary to that, he is facing a much tougher lineup. So they each have their pros and cons. But again, they're very cheap. You're not looking for them to break the slate today. If you played them, you would be very content if they got you 15 or 16. There's no doubt about it, because you're playing them to just fill the rest of your lineup with fat bats, more or less. So, all right, move on to.
I just don't think you need to do it today, though, JJ. You just don't need to go down there today unless you're trying to get one of those really expensive minis. If if you're trying to play Acuna and Olsen, for the Braves, or you're trying to play, let's say, so you want right-handers today for the Dodgers. If you were trying to play Mookie Betts and JD Martinez, then yeah, you would go down here. But I just don't think there's a reason to today.
Yeah, and to be clear, I completely agree with that. All right, so Angels Rays, game 2 of a doubleheader. Patrick Sandoval, Pablo, LOL. Zach Eflin. I'll be honest, it's hard to love anything about this game. I don't know if we're going to get lineups for this game because it's a doubleheader until later tonight, because I think the other game still actually actively going? It is actively going. It's in the bottom of the 8th. Tight one there. You're going to see some bullpen arms in the works for sure, especially from the Angels end. I'll be honest, though, what I find interesting in this game is Zach Eflin's price. So he is very playable at this number. He is just cheaper than we're used to seeing him. So I don't like him on the road, though. He is very difficult to click on when on the road. He's very difficult to bet on when on the road. But the Angels these days aren't exactly putting out crazy lineups. I'm just trying to confirm what they did with that first game to maybe give some idea what could be happening in the second game. And I'll be honest, they put out a handful of starters, at least as good of starters as they usually can in that first game. I'm sure they'll be able to add an extra bat or two in the second game, but who knows how many of these guys might end up sitting the second game, especially with it being a tight back and forth. What is your thoughts on any piece about this game? Obviously, we don't have lineups, so it's hard to even project bats, but just talk briefly pitching. To me, Sandoval's unplayable per se, because it's a tough Rays lineup, and he's not exactly a huge K guy. He definitely has a decent K per 9, but he also gets himself into jams. So walk me through both pitchers. Would you play either? I personally, at the price, could be convinced into Zach Eflin.
I can too, absolutely. Zach Eflin at 9,100 feels right. It feels like a spot I want to be a part of. It's a great matchup against the Angels. They're just not good. We don't have the lineup, but Zach Eflin just got his face beat in by my tribe in his last start, and I was loving it, just for the record. But I believe in Zach Eflin. I think he's a good pitcher. He's a quality arm. Not somebody I'm looking to pick on with bats, really when he faces anybody. But he's got a good matchup here against the Angels, and I'm definitely intrigued at 9,100. That price just doesn't feel right to me. It's really good against right-handers. So yeah, I will definitely will have some exposure to Zach Eflin. I'll be even with the field or even over. As far as Sandoval, everybody is saying that Tampa Bay is reeling and that they're obviously they're not going to be as hot as they were early in the season, but this team is still hitting like damn near 280 against left-handers. They're one of the best lineups against left-handed pitching. I just won't have a lot of bats in this game. Not that I do believe in Zach Eflin, but I don't believe in Sandoval. I'm just not a fan. What I see from him, it just doesn't have that overpowering stuff that I'm looking for, that upside I'm looking for. But at the same time, this just kind of feels like a game that just kind of slips on inning through inning and nothing exciting happens. I don't see a lot happening in this game. I don't see overpowering pitching performances. So I won't have much of this at all. Zach Eflin will be in the pool, but it's not like I'm locking him into my main lineup or anything. The best thing about him is the price tag and the ownership. He's going to go a little bit under-owned here. I think he's going to be overlooked. I'm seeing 12%. If I refresh this, maybe
it's probably going to be sub that, maybe a little less. And he's always somebody that's been seeing ownership because he's usually not totally overpriced. Now, granted, he was overpriced for a few starts against some tough matchups for sure for a bit there, but he's definitely not overpriced for this matchup.
No, this might be a decent pivot spot to come off of one of these chalkier 8K guys. I mean, it's only going up a little bit. It's only 9,100. If you were, if you're looking for somebody that can put up an equivalent score to a Sonny Gray or a Tanner Bybee, Zach Eflin might be that guy for you.
Yeah, definitely not a terrible pivot by any means. Andrew, I know Webb's a solid pitcher, struggle more against lefties. Andrew, I'll tell you this, ironically enough, with Logan Webb, before this year, he's always struggled more with lefties. This year, for whatever reason, he has reverse splits. He's actually been struggling with right-handed bats. I don't know if that's an anomaly. The sample size is large enough to argue it's not. But for whatever reason, Logan Webb has a weighted OBA of about 315 against right-handed bats this year. And it's like 260 against lefties. He's getting hit by righties. So I hope that helps Andrew. But again, I don't know because before this year, he has always been hit harder by left-handed bats. However, this year it has been a little different. Appreciate you, Malacor. 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 I think I did a good job on that third pronunciation. I think you correct me if I'm wrong if I did a good job on pronouncing it the third time. But I think I got it. Always appreciate you. Much love all around from anybody, of course, who likes the shows. And speaking of liking the shows, it's not hard to actually like the show. Not sure what our exact running tally is right now, but I'm sure we can get ourselves over 100. Malacor. I was close. That rounds off. But appreciate you watching, and I'm glad that you enjoy all the content. So guys, go ahead and like the video. 145 of you watching. It's not hard for us to get to 100 likes, right? For the culture. LOL. All right. So last but not least, final game on the slate. Dodgers and the Finns. Marlins. Late game hammer. Not by much though. A few minutes from the other three or the other two. Marlins put a ass whooping on the Dodgers. Was that yesterday, 2 days ago when behind Alcantara?
Yesterday.
Yeah. So absolute ass whooping on them. Obviously today we get Urias on the mound and then Braxton Garrett on the other side. Now Urias has been pitching pretty well lately. A few 20 burgers in a row, comes off a 35 burger last week. We know about the upside he possesses. I typically don't like playing this guy off big games, but he's kind of been proving me wrong the last time. And that's more of a narrative piece, to be honest, why I don't like playing him off big games. If you just look back at this dude's career, whenever he seems to nuke, it just usually doesn't go that way his next start. I don't know if it's a mental thing. I don't know what it is, but again, that's more of a narrative than anything. But this is a decent spot for him. Not a spot I love per se. But the price is okay. It's not terrible. It's not great. And we know he has upside. What are we doing here, if anything, Steve? Or is the total in this game is 8.5? Implied totals, both teams. Dodgers is 4.5. Marlins is 3.5. So there will be some runs in this game, presumably. You like anything here?
Yeah, I think the majority of these runs are going to come from the Dodgers side. Although Braxton Garrett's not somebody I like to pick on. I actually like Braxton Garrett quite a bit. Not on this slate and not in this matchup, but just in general as a big league arm. I am a Braxton Garrett fan. I know that he's been getting hit pretty hard of late. Julio Urias, again, he's coming off that ceiling game, right? He threw 88 pitches against the Rockies. He struck out 12. Like you said, more of a narrative thing. Don't really like playing guys coming off of a ceiling game, but at 9,200, I can see it. I can definitely justify having him in the pool. The Marlins bats aren't scaring anybody. At least they're not scaring me. Urias only has a 4.5K strikeout prop or 4.5 strikeout prop. It is juiced way to the over. But I don't have I don't have interest in him much in this game. I would rather stay with the core pitchers that I have in the pool, and those are Bybee and Gray and Darvish. I think they're just safer, higher upside options than Urias. And the Dodgers, I can't argue with anyone that's going to roster Dodgers today, but just for me personally, Braxton Garrett's not somebody I like to pick on. So I won't have a lot of that either.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough spot to like love anything in particular. Whether it's pitching or hitting, like the market props on these guys aren't really that good. So just tough to love anything here. I mean, maybe you can stick some bats as you mentioned. Maybe you play Urias as well, but again, not tough to love there. And I see Malakar mentioning big Detroit fan, Torque Green, Carp on fire. Detroit's been hitting a bit, obviously Miggy, LOL, which goes in part to, why I kind of like that over in that game. If they can tag a few off BB, and the Guardians should be able to grab runs off Manning, who's been, waking up with birch on his windshield to even have an ERA at 4.6. So, all in all, I'm glad we're arm in arm there, Malakar. With that said, that kind of wraps it up. I already mentioned the home run call. I like Alonso tonight to dong. And again, I know people are like, oh, he hits a ton of home runs. Well, he's going to be 6% owned tonight. So if he homers tonight, consider me a big fan. So yeah, I like Alonso to dong tonight. You want to give a dong call, Stevers?
Yeah.
Got a few different places you can go.
Yeah, let me give one out here today.
What's up, Chris?
So I'm not going to pick one from Coors. That's cheesy. So let's go to San Francisco. I like San Francisco today. Let's go Wilmer Flores getting one off of Yanni Chirinos today. 3,400. You can get yourself some Wilmer Flores today.
Wilmer, that's Big T's boy. So
why not?
Love to hear that. And Chris, it's nice to hear the Mariners are 6-2 against the Astros. Be nice to see them sneak in. I know, Chris, you've been following for a while. Nice to see the Mariners having a decent year. Hopefully they can get to the playoffs. Steve, not sure if you know, I am kind of a closeted Seattle Mariner fan. I wouldn't consider myself a fanatic by any means, but and I don't lose sleep when they lose. But it is nice to see when they're playing well, and hopefully that can translate to them doing something. And Rance mentioning Brandon Nimmo. That is a good one. I mean, that's like going into the board there. Not that Nimmo has no power, but you don't always, when you think of like home runs on the Mets, it's not like Nimmo's always the guy you go to. I mean, obviously sub power, but that would be a good one. Obviously he's homered. It's got to be
lefty. It'll be lefty on lefty if he gets it. So.
Yeah, it's got to be now 3 of 5 games or 4 of 6, something like that. I know he's been homering lately, so not a bad look at all there, Rance. All right, boys and girls, great show all around. Stevers, thank you for hanging out. Thank you for talking through these games. Obviously, always love and appreciate you guys in the chat commenting. Guys, head over to runpuresports.com. 20% off for life. Any all packages. Code NFL20. Once the NFL starts, that code will be non-existent. So get it while you can. Catch it while you can. And head over to runpuresports.com. There's obviously, these shows will continue obviously on the free end. So obviously extract as much information as you can that way. Slate starts another 20 minutes, so it gives you guys time to build lineups. Malakar, good to see you. Nice to meet you. Hope you're back as well. And thanks, Chris, for that update on Crawford. Interesting stuff overall with the Mariners, LOL. But with all that said, gamble responsibly, stay safe, and run pure, everybody. I'll be back tomorrow.